What's up, everybody? Today I'm going to be teaching you how the cage system works. Before we get started, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you're interested, email me for some guitar lessons. They're $30 an hour. All right, let's get started. So, you may or may not have heard of the cage system before. The word cage is an essential part of understanding this system. So here's what the word caged actually means in this specific scenario and for this system. So basically, each letter has a specific position that you have to apply, and you can move it anywhere up the fretboard you want, all of them. So there's a C position, there's a A position, there's a G position, there's a E position, and then there's a D position, right? For each of these chords, the open chord is the position. You're moving that open chord up and then you're adding a bar behind it. But each of the chords are a little different. So we're going to go over all of them today. This will require you to know how to play bar chords to an extent. Okay. If you're struggling with bar chords, then check out my video where I give you an exercise and I give you some tips for how to do better with bar chords. All right. Let's get started. So the first letter we're going to take a look at is C. Here it is. Now that we've taken a look at the open position of C major, let's analyze that chord a little bit more closely so that we can make sure that you're using the best finger placement that's going to prepare you to move that chord up and put your bar behind it, which is the cage position. This is the best finger placement you can have for the open position of C major chord if you're planning on switching this and transitioning from this chord to the cage position of the C major chord. You want to make sure that you have your pinky finger on the third note, your ring finger on the second note, and your middle finger on that first note. Now that we've taken a look at our open position C major chord, we've broke it down and we've made sure we have all the information we need for that. Now we can switch to that cage position. Let's take a look at how the cage position of the C major chord sounds. Now that we've taken a look at how the cage position of C major sounds, let's break down this chord so then you can understand the chord and you can know how to use it effectively around the fretboard. Now that we've added our bar, we can move this chord anywhere up or down the fretboard we want. I know that the bar you see on this chord chart only shows 3 frets being barred, but in reality, you would bar every fret, okay, except for that last string. Here's how this looks. Now let's talk about the root of the C cage position. So whichever note is being fretted on the A string, that is the name of the chord. Therefore, for the specific chord you see on the screen right now, this chord would be C sharp major. And we know this because whichever note is being fretted on the A string, that's the name of our chord. Okay. And the 4th fret of the A string is C sharp. You're still using the C cage position, but the name of the chord itself would be C sharp major. And it's because of where you're using the position on the fretboard. Not saying it's impossible, but it will be really helpful if you knew the notes of the fretboard and where the notes on the fretboard are at if you want to be able to use the cage system to its full ability. All right, the next chord or letter that we're going to go over is A. Let's take a look at how our open position for the A major chord looks. Now that we know how our open position for the A major chord looks, let's break down the chord chart for that to make sure that you're fretting the chord right and putting your fingers in the best position to get that bar behind the chord. This is the finger placement you want to make sure you have for your open position of the A major chord. Let's take a quick look at the finger placement I had for my chord when I fretted it. As you can see, my pinky finger is occupying a note, my ring finger is occupying the note in the middle, and then my middle finger is occupying that last note that's pointing up towards me. Using this finger placement will ensure that you get a smooth transition to A major bar chord. Now that we've taken a look at our A major chord at its open position, now we can add that bar behind it. Let's analyze and break down how it looks and how we're supposed to use it once we've added that bar to it. Now that we've added our bar and we have our bar chord, you want to make sure that you understand what you can actually do with this chord. Just like our C major chord, you can move this anywhere around the fretboard you want to. Okay? For this to actually be useful on the instrument, you're going to need to know your fretboard, which means knowing where the notes are on the A string. For our A chord cage position, whatever note that you're fretting on the A string, that's your root. So for this specific chord you see on the chart right now, this would be A sharp major chord. And we know this because the first fret of the A string is A sharp. You would know this if you know your fretboard and you know where the notes are on the fretboard. The next chord or letter that we're going to take a look at is G. Let's take a quick look at the open position of the G major chord. Now that we know how the open position of our G major chord looks, let's break it down a little bit so that we can make sure that you're using the best finger placement that puts you in the best spot to smoothly transition to the cage position of G major. This is the finger placement you want to make sure you have for your open position of the G major chord. You want to make sure that your ring finger is on the third note, your middle finger is on the second note, and your pinky finger is on the fourth note. Having your finger placement like this, it allows you to have your index finger free. This allows you to smoothly be able to transition to a bar chord whenever you want using your index finger. Now that we've taken a look at all of the things that we need for our open position of the G major chord to set us up for our cage position, let's take a look at the cage position of G major. Now that we've taken a look at our cage position of G major, let's break down the chord a little bit so then you understand the chord and you can use it effectively. Now that we've added our bar, we can move this chord anywhere up the fretboard we want. Just to confirm with you, that T that is right there in the corner of our chord chart, you still use your ring finger, that's still 3. I don't know why that T is there. For our G major chord in the cage position, whichever note is being fretted on the low E string, that's the name of our chord. So for the chord you see on the screen, this would be G sharp major. It's still the G major position, but once again, whichever note is being fretted on the low E string, that is the name of our chord. And the fourth fret of the low E string is G sharp major. Once again, you got to know your fretboard. The next chord or letter that we're going to go over is E. Let's take a look at how the open position of the E major chord sounds. All right. And now we're just going to analyze and go over the open position of the E major chord a little bit more so that we can make sure that you guys are using the correct finger placement and you're putting your fingers in the best place possible to prepare you to use your bar chord finger. As you can see, here we have the open position for our E major chord. This is the finger placement you want to make sure you have to ensure that your index finger is set up for you to transition to the cage position, which is a bar chord. Okay, you should have your ring finger on that first note. You should have your pinky finger on that second note and your middle finger on that third note, which is the last note. And now that we've went over how we should be fretting our open position of the E major chord, let's take a look at how our E major chord in the cage position sounds. All right, and now let's break down the E major cage position chord a little bit. All right, so then we can make sure you guys understand it and you know what your root is and stuff like that. Now that we've added our bar, we have our cage position E major bar chord. We can move this chord anywhere up or down the fretboard we want. When it comes to our E cage position in bar chord form, whichever note is being fretted on the low E string, that is the name of our chord. So, for the specific chord you see on the screen right now, this chord would be called F major. And we know this because the first fret of the low E string is being fretted in this chord. And the first fret of the low E string is the F note. This is still the E cage position, but the chord itself would be F major. All right. The next chord or letter that we're going to go over is D. Let's take a look at how the open position of the D major chord sounds. Now that we know how the open position of the D major chord sounds, now let's break down that chord a little bit so we can make sure that you're using the best finger placement that will prepare you to transition to the cage position of the D major chord. As you can see, we have the open position of our D major chord here. This is the finger placement you want to prepare yourself best to transition to the cage position of the D major chord. All right. That first note is that string. That's an open string. You should be strumming that, but there should be no fretting on that. On your second note, you want your middle finger. On the third note, you want your pinky finger. And on that fourth note, which is that last note, you want your ring finger. Just to give you another refresher, here is how this chord looks on the fretboard. Now that we know a little bit about our open position of the D major chord, let's take a look at how the cage position of the D major chord sounds. Now that we know how the cage position of our D major chord sounds, let's break down that chord a little bit so then you can know how to use this chord in this position effectively up and down the fretboard. Now that we have our bar, we can move this chord anywhere up the fretboard. You may be asking, well, where is actually the bar at? Well, that note right there actually has a lot to do with our bar. All you're doing is you're barring up to the point where you're not supposed to bar anymore on those last two X's. This is how that looks. Now let's talk about the root of this chord and how to know what the name of different chords are when you use this position. For this specific chord, the name of this chord would be D sharp major. We know this because whatever note is being fretted on the D string in this position, that's the name of the chord. And the first fret of the D string, which is where this note is D sharp. We're still using the D caged position, but the chord itself would be called D sharp major because of where that position lies on the fretboard. And that is it, guys. If you watched this video all the way through and you watched me go over each and every single one of the letters, then now you know the cage system. I went over how the cage position works in this video, but I didn't really go over how you can actually make music with it. If this video can get 100 likes, then I will make a video about how you can apply the cage system to your instrument in a way to where you can actually make music. But for now, that's it. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. I hope you guys all have a very blessed day. Shabbat Shalom.